All right, good morning, everyone. I apparently am chair of the day, so I will call this meeting to order. We have minutes from the December 14th meeting. Has everyone reviewed those? Does anyone have any corrections or amplifications they'd like to make? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve those minutes or accept the minutes.
Bill Amara moved. Paul Avila second.
Madam Chair, I was absent last go around, so I'm going to have to abstain unless you really need me to vote yes to move them forward, then I'll do so.
And I don't think I was there either, so we'll have to ask for how many are in the room. Do we have, can we get these approved without us?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, is there any objection to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are accepted with both supervisors abstaining. We'll move on to number 3, follow-up items. Do we have anything on that, Derek?
None on our end, Supervisor.
Okay. Then our first presentation is the 2019 Rural Forecast Implementation of the 2016 AQMP. I'll turn it over to Michael.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Rutherford and committee. My name is Mike Krause. I'm a Planning and Rules Manager here at the South Coast AQMD. I think my presentation is coming up here for you. All right. Am I in control? No. Okay. Okay, next slide. So just as a reminder, the 2016 AQMP, we evaluated 5 air quality standards. This was a comprehensive plan. So that means that we looked at not just stationary source measures and those corresponding pollutants with them, but also mobile source measures as well. As you know, we have limited mobile source authority, but we also work with our sister agencies such as the California Air Resources Board and the US EPA, who do have authority over a lot of those sources, and work with them to incorporate it into our plan. So again, state and federal
I have
measures.
it on here.
We also incorporated in the 2016 AQMP incentive measures, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. In that plan, just as a reminder, we had attainment dates for the federal standards and for not only Coachella Valley, but also for the air basin. We then also defined, we worked on defining what is called under the Clean Air Act 182E5 measures. These are measures that allows areas in the country that are considered extreme non-attainment, so the furthest away from attainment, to allow them future technologies. So if we know that we've got 20 years and in about 10 years there's going to be technologies we don't know of today, that we can build that into the plan. So we can say, come that future year, we can define those future technologies. Well, guess what? The future is today. The future is here. So we've in this plan worked on trying to define a little bit more of those, and it is required, by the way, under the Clean Air Act to do that 3 years in advance of the attainment year. Okay, one sec, I jumped a little too far here. In the plan, there were a list of what they call control measures. Control measures are sort of like, think of it like a concept car, right? You go to the automotive conventions and you see the cool concept car. How is that going to eventually look when you put it into production? So this is kind of what the plan does. It comes up with these concepts or control measures that we outline, and we set ourselves up goals on those. But those are the first step before actually developing a regulatory rule or a regulatory type program. Okay, so what I pinpointed here, however, was trying to tie in some of the activities that we've been working on as staff back to those control measures. So you see those kind of numbers there, like the CMB01, CMB02. CMB, by the way, stands for combustion. ECC is our term for energy and climate change measures. For some of those, we have a recent RFP that we just awarded out $48 million to incentivize emission reduction projects. These are both stationary and mobile sources. I'm going to touch on those in a second. A rule we just passed last month, the board just approved, a new rule, 1118.1, regarding non-refinery flares. That was a specific control measure, so we satisfied that action that we promised and committed in the plan. One of the other control measures that you're probably all familiar with is CMB05. That is the transition of those facilities subject to our current reclaim program into a more command and control or source-specific regulatory structure. And I've listed out here a number of those different types of rules. So anyone involved in those, you probably recognize those numbers and the corresponding affected facilities or sources. And then finally, we've got some other measures that we put into the plan that address what we call facility-based measures or indirect sources. Yes, sir.
Michael, you indicated there were certain areas that were unachievable for air quality. What are they?
So currently, we're not in compliance with the ozone standard.
Okay.
Or the PM 2.5 standard. And there's different ways of measuring those. So ozone back in the late 70s was defined as a 1 hour standard, but then in 1997, they changed the parameters of that to an 8 hour standard, but we're not in attainment for either one of those. And for the PM 2.5, there's also two different ways of measuring the standard. It's either done on a daily basis or 24 hour, and an annual, and neither one of those standards we've met yet, but we're getting close. Okay, for the request for proposal, so in January, our board did approve a request for proposal for these incentivized emission reduction projects. I just wanted to note here, we also included some technology demonstration projects. We believe that there's a lot of potential out there, and there's lots of great ideas, and I think this is a great opportunity to help explore those ideas and put those into fruition. By way of background, we did get 58 out of 81 of those. We got 81 submittals. 58 of those were technically qualified. Of those technically qualified, they were requesting a total of $211 million. Anyone can tell our budget that's way above our budget that we were allowed to issue. But we did end up awarding 26 projects for a total of $48 million. When on the mobile source side, these were both emission reduction projects as well as technology demonstration projects. Some of those involve zero emission vehicles such as vans, as well as some terminal equipment, electric refrigeration transport, tugboats, hovercraft, etc. On the stationary side, similarly, we had emission reductions as well as tech assessments or tech demos. Those were really focused on things like residential energy efficiency, some street sweeping. That's like it says that, but even though it's not the vehicles, it's actually the program. And then restaurants, fuel cells, etc. We did project from those plans. Again, this is just the projection we outlined it from the plans. We haven't really been able to verify that yet until we actually see some of these go into fruition. But anticipating 88 tons a year of NOx emissions and 2 tons on the PM 2.5 side. Todd, did you have anything? I saw you moving the microphone a little bit. Okay. Just getting ready. Okay, got it.
Michael?
Yes. Hi, Bill.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
The 26 projects that were awarded, is there a list of what those projects are?
Yes. So those you can find those as an agenda board item in January. And what I can do is let me go ahead and I'll send you a link to that.
Oh, good.
To that board letter.
Okay. Then the other question I had, this 48 million, that's for the 26 projects?
That's correct. That's a total amount for the.
Okay, and is projects. That largely NOx emissions?
Largely NOx, yes. There are a few VOC and a few PM, but largely NOx.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I kind of get, if I just divide 26 into 48 million, I get 545,000, almost 500. That's an awful lot. As far as your cost of emission of a pound of emissions or a ton of emissions reduced, isn't it?
I'm sorry, Bill. Okay, we're talking about the emissions.
You're getting
okay,
88,
sorry, I think
you're getting 88 tons a year for $48 million. That's a half a billion. That's a $500 million a ton.
Right.
Am I correct or incorrect?
So, yes and no. Okay, remember that I noted that some of those are emission reduction projects and some of those are technology demonstration projects. The technology demonstration projects are not projected into these reductions. So there would just be straight out from the emission reduction projects.
Yeah, but these are your numbers, not mine. So I'm
right. So what I'm getting at is out of the 26 projects, maybe half of those, let's say, are technology demo projects, and that would not be counted in on the reductions projections.
So it would be even more expensive. Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would be more expensive then, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, again, they're half the projects, though. 13 projects would be achieving 88 tons. as opposed to 26 projects achieving 88 tons. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, so that's more expensive then. That's even more expensive than $500 million.
Well, I mean, the 48 was 48. So, what I'm saying is it's, we might be spending more per project, but it's not, but for those projects, less projects are achieving more reductions as opposed to the full 26.
It raises a lot of questions, at least on the business side, as to cost effectiveness. In other words, if you've got $1 to spend to reduce emissions,
sure.
What are we getting? What's the public getting for that in terms of improved health and any other benefits, quality of life, and so on?
Sure.
And certainly from a business perspective, we're still required to continue to pay
right.
on this. So I
I
guess it's the cost effectiveness of this. That's our question, or my question.
It's a good question. I mean, and you were part of our QMB advisory group, and you recognized how much we were even projecting out to incentivize and give monies out to get what we were projecting for reductions. And those were way out of what we would traditionally on a regulatory side see as cost effective. But we wanted to, I think we have to start investing in these businesses somewhere, even if we, maybe on the surface it may not be considered that same sort of cost effective, again, how we would judge on a regulatory side. I think particularly when this is our first time out on this, particularly on the stationary side, right? And for us to be able to see, is this money well spent, and are we progressing in those technology demonstrations and allowing these businesses and small businesses to be able to have an opportunity to demonstrate their abilities to get onto the big stage and to, and produce more reductions. So I think it's almost like an investment in your future.
Yeah, and I guess this kind of harkens back to an issue that I've been harping on for years, certainly through the last several AQMPs, is that businesses, especially small businesses, are really going to depend on incentive dollars, not just going into a community, but going into the businesses that are going to be required to purchase and install these new technologies to lower their emissions.
Yeah.
And because we've passed, we're now in the area of unaffordability for a lot of businesses, certainly small businesses, to be able to do that. If you all continue to ratchet down, and our legislators keep passing bills that require us to do that,
right? Yeah.
Because they're just not affordable. They're very costly for large businesses, but many of them are just not affordable for small businesses.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, just put things in context. You have to remember now that when we worked on the plan, we need between our base year time to when our first goalpost is going to be is about 382 tons a day of nitrogen oxide reductions, right? As an agency, we have authority over 12% of those, so we're only talking about 45 tons, so, and yet we're looking and seeking to commit to close to 2 billion over the next 15 years to get those reductions that we need on the stationary side. So, yeah, it's a lot, but we're down at that closer end, so it's really hard to kind of keep pressing on those on the regulatory angle, and start exploring more on the incentivized. Yes, David.
Since we're talking about the AQMP and how to get to that goalpost, you have, I forgot, what is it, 100 tons per day we have to reduce by 2023, somewhere around there, is the reductions we're seeking. And then a certain amount of it is stationary source versus mobile source. And I know that Dr. Lou's asked this, I've asked this, as far as for all the rules that South Coast is trying to adopt, do you have a running total saying, here's what we need to do by 2023, here's how we're progressing to get to that goal? Because something that Bill and I routinely talk about is penalties if we don't get to attainment. And if we're not going to get to attainment, it's nice to have a little forewarning so we can start talking to Congress or whoever about giving relief rather than, penalties that we can't control. Like you said, it's CARB and EPA that need to do their fair share, and I'm not quite sure if they're keeping up with the goal as well. So if businesses haven't done anything wrong, they're just complying with this, and there's penalties that will come down the pike, it'd be nice to be talking about that if we see we're not going to get there. So is there a running total of how we're doing?
Yes. So actually, if you look at the rule forecast calendar in January, we actually have that we put on annually every year, which is our report card of how we're progressing on the AQMP. So I've created this table where it actually shows what we've committed, the timeframes we've committed, what we've already achieved so far. And so it kind of keeps it up to date. Now, mind you, we've only gone through our first year, in doing that, so you're not going to see, an abundance amount. But I think, as with most of the plan implementations, these tend to be on bell curves, right? So you kind of get started, you're doing your development, and then you get a surge of a lot of those projects getting approved and starting to see those reductions happening, and tails off until the next plan. The state and the feds have also committed in the plan, and they themselves have a sort of quote, as you say, like a running tally of where their progress is at. When it comes to penalties, okay, so as you know, in the Clean Air Act, there is a requirement by which there are contingency measures, and we're actually going to be you're going to start seeing some of these in some upcoming rule developments, whereby if we don't meet attainment, then these get triggered. So this is sort of the first step before any of these sort of quote unquote penalties. Remember, we really only get those consequences when you fail to submit a plan, or fail to work out all the do your best effort, do your due diligence. When you are short of those goals, there's not a lot when it comes to backstopping those, except for the contingency. So we will be having some more of that dialogue as we continue getting closer to at least our first goal.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we let Michael finish his presentation and then the questions afterwards, or we'll be here for a very long time. Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, very good. So again, I just want to highlight here our new rule. This does, it's not only just a new rule that was in the plan, but it also satisfies a requirement in the Clean Air Act called RAC-RACM, which is reasonably available control technology, meaning that there is other air agencies in the state of California that have regulations on these types of sources. So because we're still in extreme non-attainment, these are one of those goals that we're expected by US EPA to achieve, which I believe we have. Just so anyone who's interested, this does regulate limits, or puts limits on nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, and carbon monoxide emissions coming from new flares. For existing flares, the rule sets up a structure by which each facility determines what kind of percentage of their capacity of their existing flare are they using. And we presented limits on those depending upon the industry, and they take an accountability of that percentage that they're using. And so if they exceed that threshold 2 consecutive years in a row, then they're expected to take some form of action, whether they reduce those emissions down by diverting, let's say, some of the gas handling through a beneficial use or reducing production, or they could replace it with a new cleaner flare. So those are the options. The board did decide for us to, as they approved the rule, to move on 2 fronts for some future technical assessments. One of those that was requested is an evaluation of all the different types of beneficial use for gas handling out there. So we're looking into that, developing a steering committee and things like that. And another one is to discuss the impacts from the SB 1383, the state regulation that looks at food waste diversion. The concept there is let's get food waste out of the landfills and move those into something that has a beneficial use, like a digester. And so you can gain benefits and reduce any potential impacts on the landfills. Jumping around here. Okay, another rule is that we're working on currently. This is a big landing rule. So all those lists that I showed you from the transition out of reclaim, this is probably one of the larger. This is the larger one out of this because this focuses in on the crude petroleum refineries. And so again, this is considered "quote unquote" a landing rule. I listed out here some of those key pieces of equipment that we're focusing on. So far, we've had we're still in development, but this is a big one. We've had 6 working groups, and we're currently doing an analysis for best available retrofit control technology for each of these types of categories. And we've also just finished up, we haven't yet we're still reviewing some bids that we received on an RFP for a consultant to assist the staff in reviewing that BART analysis. And that's going to be very key. When you have this BART analysis, you're reviewing the types of retrofit or replacement control technology out there and what best fits for each one of those categories. And you have to ensure that it's like technologically feasible, that it's also cost effective as well. So it's a pretty complex analysis. So to have some support from a third party is what we're trying to seek in the RFP. You guys have all probably heard at this point now, Assembly Bill 617. Just wanted to note that this is another effort going on in parallel with some of the other efforts that we're doing in the planning, or actually as an agency. So the Assembly Bill 617 requested the state to look at the highest priority locations in the communities and then to require monitoring in those communities. Those community monitoring efforts are being deployed by the local air agencies. We ourselves have 3 areas like at least in the South Coast Air Basin, and I believe 1 outside of that. Okay, so what that also looks at too, which I thought some people probably aren't aware of, is that some of those areas that they're doing their monitoring, the local air agencies could identify some stationary sources emitting air pollutants that are probably problematic, possibly for the community. And in those particular cases, to deploy a fence line monitoring system for those specific sources. This is something that we have to look at, obviously, in the future when we start getting data in, but I just wanted to make people aware of that. And ultimately, we will be adopting community emission reduction programs. They call them CERPs. Those are the initials, and those will dive in a little bit deeper with some more specific efforts and actions to be taken in that particular community. So basically, we view this as almost like a little mini AQMP for those areas to help continue to reduce emissions and protect public health. Okay, one other thing that the Assembly Bill talks about too is that for non-attainment areas like ourselves, they expected us to expedite the implementation of the BART, or the best available retrofit control technology. And the interesting part there is that it actually notes that the highest priorities should be given to those units that have not modified for the greatest or the longest period of time. So it definitely gives a very definitive path that I know are looking at under our Rule 1109.1 to continue to implement the BART. And they ask us in the Assembly Bill to implement it as early as possible, but no later than December 31st, 2023. Okay, so this upcoming year, we've already posted our rule forecast. The board approved that back in December, but you can again see that on our monthly agenda item for our rule forecast report. Just listed out here. What I wanted to do is break it up in a little different way than you normally see it. A lot of people just see it on a monthly basis and stuff. But what I wanted to highlight was that when we, there's definitely a focus when we come up with these rules. So on the left-hand column, you'll see a list of type. And this is important because these are this is basically the reasoning behind why we're proposing to look at this rule, either to adopt one or to amend. And then we list out a rule, the rule titles, and then the targeted pollutants. As you can see, something that I think Bill was pointing out was like how much we're heavy on the NOx. The reason for this is because NOx is a pollutant that kind of drives the ozone standard. So if we can really get down the 8-hour ozone standard, the 1 hour actually was driven by VOC. So that's why this agency early on had a lot of heavy VOC reductions, because we were trying to achieve that 1 hour ozone standard. So anyhow, on the types there, you'll see focused on just strictly for the AQMP. These are commitments that we've made to take a look at those operations and see where we can find opportunities for reductions. However, the AQMP now is coupled with, and you can't see it because there's a line there, but AB 617, again, requiring us to implement best available control technology. And you'll see the list of those types of sources there and the rule numbers. But our agency also goes beyond that. We also look at toxics as well. That's also, authorized us under the California Health and Safety Code. And those are under our Regulation 14. And so we have a list here of the different types of Reg 14 rules. And again, the source types there under the rule title. And then finally, there's other types of other types of facilities and other types of regulatory measures that we'll be taking, such as the approval in our plan for facility-based mobile source measures. So this looks at how can we look at types of sources, so like warehouses or rail yards or the airports or the ports, and those will kind of fall under there. As if you're following some of the board activity, recently they've sort of had a vote on this to for staff to kind of move forward, or either on a regulatory path or on an MOU path, and you can see we've broken up that there with airports and ports, and then some other things that we'll be working on. On the mobile source side, it's basically driven through our agency through incentivized programs, and what I wanted to list out here were those programs and the awarded monies. Now, this is not always spent, but at least it was awarded, and pretty much if you get awarded money, I'm sure it will be spent. But what we've got here is the awarded monies on the mobile source side from those programs, and then our projected reductions that we believe we'll be achieving from those. And again, this is on the mobile source side. For our next steps, again, we'll continue to amend and adopt rules to satisfy the plan, or AB 617. We are going to be seeking some more funding opportunities. We will continue to support those mobile source incentive measures, the green table you just saw. But we also want to begin to implement those emission reduction projects that Bill and I were just discussing under this new RFP, again, both on the stationary and mobile source side, and monitor the progress on that, and maybe we can hopefully maybe even higher than the 88 tons a year that was projected on the initial submittals. And then finally, what's really is kind of important on the planning side, just as an FYI, is that to achieve these emission reduction projects under an incentivized program is great, but in order to do that, at least on the stationary side, EPA is seeking some very specific guidance. So in order for us to get credit in our state implementation plan, or our SIP. So that's another effort that we're working on as staff to get that approved and through EPA. So that should help us even further. That's all.
Great. Supervisor Rutherford, did you want to open up to questions?
Sure. I have about 2 minutes before I have to get out of here, so we should probably pass the chair to someone else. Okay. But, and I can't see you all again, so I don't know who has questions. There you are. Who would like to ask the first question? Make the first comment.
David Rothbart.
My quick question pertaining to, you directed me to the rule forecast, which is very helpful, and it shows for the stationary measures the progress. So that's great. That answers that question. But most of the reductions are on the mobile side, and in the rule forecast, it has the same table that you just showed.
Right, because those are the programs that we,
And my question would be, for the reductions, one, is that statewide? Because there's statewide programs.
No, that's regional.
So that's for the South Coast Air Basin?
That's correct.
And as far as what we are supposed to achieve by a certain time frame to get 563.9 tons per day, that's pretty close to the inventory, right?
That was tons per day? Are you sure? No, that's tons per year.
Per year. Okay, okay. Yeah, that's why I'm having a disconnect. So
that would be great. We'd be okay. Job done.
Yes, exactly. So for that said, it doesn't have the summary that I was kind of looking for as far as what is the goal. To get to attainment, what do we have to have from the mobile source side as well?
Okay, so we do have that. We do have those numbers all in the air quality management plan.
Correct.
So those are already listed out on what our goal is, what our commitments are, and where those commitments are coming from. I believe if you're asking about where we're at when it comes on the state and the federal level, I can get that for you because state has passed a few of those efforts.
Just as far as where we are to get to attainment, it would be nice to be able to see how they're doing.
Sure. But again, it's an ongoing process, right? Understood. So it's just what they've accomplished so far. We can get that to you.
Thanks.
No problem.
Any other questions?
I believe Rita.
Rita, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Mike. I see on slide 8 on your rule forecast that 1106, the Marine Coatings Operations, is the only VOC rule that appears on that list. And RADTEC submitted comments on that rule. And part of our concern is that we don't have a problem achieving the VOC reductions, but the requirements in the rule actually don't act as an incentive. They act as a disincentive for people to convert to lower emitting processes, because the amount of record keeping that is required. It just doesn't give the stationary sources that are going above and beyond what they're supposed to do, doesn't give them an incentive or any kind of reward for making the capital investment. So that was one of the comments that we made, and stationary sources were always frustrated that we get all the sticks and none of the carrots, like Bill was mentioning, because all the incentives seem to be going to the mobile source side.
Sure. Well, I just want to apologize in advance. I'm not working on that particular rule development, but I do know that they will be addressing this record keeping. So I'm assuming there's probably an upcoming meeting, with regards to that, and I encourage you to participate and drive that point. Thank you.
Paul, you have a question?
Mike, you mentioned that the district knows where the stationary pollutants are. They're going to put fence monitors around. Isn't that fair enough?
When that's identified through the community monitoring. So it's sort of a step-by-step. So the first you'll have the community monitoring, we'll get data in from that,
okay,
and then make determinations if there's some substantial emissions that we're reading, like when we did with Paramount, when we started seeing a lot of the hexachrome numbers, things like that, and then we can go and identify those sources. And
like similar to the Exide.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, Bill.
Just a question. I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you. The fence line monitoring, when you have emissions that you're not quite sure where they come from or what the sources are, you can't tie them back to a particular address. Is the district paying for that, or are the facilities having to pay for that kind of fence line monitoring?
So this will be covered under the Assembly Bill 617 funds.
Okay, under the 617 funds.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, there's none over here. Supervisor Perez, looks like Supervisor Rutherford had to leave, so you're in charge.
All right, well, if there aren't any more questions, why don't we go ahead and move on and receive the update on the South Coast Air Quality Management District incentive programs. I think Vicki White.
Does this work? Okay. Just 1 minute for my slides to come up. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Vicki White, and I work as a technology implementation manager in our technology advancement office. And my primary role is to manage the implementation of our incentive funding programs that target mobile source emission reduction programs. Mobile source emission reductions, which it sounds like there was some earlier questions on that, so I hope I'll be able to answer that. This purpose of this presentation is to give an update on our incentive programs, where we're at, what we did, looking back in 2018, and a little bit about what we're going to do moving forward. This slide shows our main incentive programs that have been running for many years. You may have heard of the Carl Moyer program. This program was established back in 1998. We're now in we're entering our 21st year of implementation. This program targets basically the retirement of diesel engines and replacing those older polluting engines with new, cleaner technologies. And as you can see here, it includes a variety of on and off-road sources, including marine vessels, locomotives, all in the heavy-duty vehicle and equipment categories. Very successful program. We're generally speaking always oversubscribed. We don't have sufficient funds to cover all the requests that come in for eligible projects. Prop 1B program, you may have also heard of this program. This program essentially targets again, diesel emissions, reducing diesel emissions from vehicles and equipment that are engaged in goods movement activities. And this includes heavy-duty trucks, marine vessels, locomotives, cargo handling equipment, the whole gamut of engines and equipment that are engaged in, hauling goods, including those equipment at the ports and the trucks that are engaged in drayage service, hauling the containers in and out of the ports. This program was actually began implementation back in 2009. As of March of last year, we fully allocated all of the funding. So our basin received about $485 million under the Prop 1B Goods Movement Program. Those funds have been completely committed to projects. And at this time, we're just in the process of monitoring them, assuring the implementation as we move forward. We have about on the order of $4 million in projects that fell through. So we will be reallocating those funds through another solicitation for truck projects, clean truck projects coming soon. Replace Your Ride. This is a program initiated in 2015. It targets reductions from light-duty vehicles. Excuse me. These are our passenger vehicles, and it's essentially providing vouchers to what the program defines as low and moderate income motorists that are willing to scrap and retire an old car, scrap it, and get a voucher to purchase a new, cleaner car. And this program has been growing in popularity, and I'll provide a little more data in another slide coming up. Again, the focus there is targeting these low and moderate income level motorists that are willing to scrap an old car and purchase a new, cleaner vehicle. And finally, our lower emission school bus program, again, a very successful program over the years. We use primarily our local funds for this, our AB 923 funds for this. Thank you. That helps, thank you. Thank you. And this program, I have another slide on it because just at the end of 2018, we made some pretty big awards, and it also includes a pilot project for electric school buses. So I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. So as you can see, the slide shows the variety of heavy-duty vehicles and equipment that our programs target and fund, and it includes such a variety. So our staff have to be familiar with all the requirements affecting these variety of sources, because a key component of an incentive program, the programs that we have and are running right now, is they have to provide surplus emission reductions. So what that means is the fleets or the equipment owners that apply to us have to go beyond what's currently required under the the CARB regulations that affect those particular fleets. So it's pretty interesting, diverse categories. And more recently, starting last year, the Carl Moyer program is now opened up to provide funding for infrastructure. Okay, real quick, infrastructure that's used to fund primarily near zero and zero emission technologies. Yes, sir.
I have an easy one. Is there still a demand? You had mentioned heavy diesel engines, like a standalone engine, not inside of a truck. Is there still a demand for that? Like, what would be the percentage of the funds used just to buy an engine?
Oh, so yeah, that is, if I understood the question correctly, that fits into a project type under Moyer called an engine repower.
Okay.
And the fleets we find that are doing that primarily are the marine vessel category. So, it's just not maybe economical for them to buy a whole new vessel, and they like, whether it's dedicated to a fishing vessel or whatever. So they tend to remove the old diesel engine and replace that with a cleaner diesel engine.
Got it, thank you.
And they do that both for their main engines and their auxiliary engines.
Why don't we hold off questions till the end, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I can't see the members, so if folks don't mind, let's hold on questions and get through the report, and then we'll answer all the questions if that's okay with people.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is very quickly go over some of the 2018 work efforts, what our achievements were from last year, considering all the variety of incentive funds that come our way. I wanted to highlight actually the Carl Moyer program. Last year under the Carl Moyer program, we received funding requests that basically were 10 times more than our available funds. And through this program, we ended up expending all the funds that we had. And in addition to that, if you look at our November awards for the Carl Moyer program, we have a $64.7 million backup list in eligible projects that, had we had the additional funding, we would be able to implement. So pretty significant demand for the funding through the Carl Moyer program. And we were fortunate starting in 2017-18 timeframe to receive some community air protection incentive funds that could be used for the Carl Moyer program. So this $64 million in backup projects was in addition to what we were able to already fund with our AB 134 community air protection funds. And through the community air protection program, what we did was, we had commitments in spending those funds on projects that would benefit disadvantaged and low-income communities. And the minimum requirement for that was about 70%. We exceeded that. We were able to fund, it's about 87%. We just finalized the numbers for that with ARBs. So we're really proud of that figure. That I think we were the first district to allocate and award all of our community air protection incentive funds. These were the first year funds from the Budget Act of 2017. And I think my last slide today will talk about what we're looking for in terms of the Budget Act from 2018. And we continue to run what we call our VIP program. I don't know if you heard it. It's basically a voucher incentive program targeting small fleets with heavy-duty trucks. And the reason this program is important is because these fleets don't have, the buying power of a larger fleet. They also need a lot more assistance. They're not on like a set procurement schedule every year like some of the larger fleets. So this program enables them to very quickly, they basically go to a participating dealer. We have over 20 dealers that are participating in this program. The dealerships will help them fill out the paperwork that comes to us for review, and we process it within 30 days to get them into a new cleaner truck. And some of these are, independent and owner and operators with one truck. So we continue this program, and we're hoping this year to get approval to combine these voucher funds for the small fleets with the other state program, the hybrid voucher program, to help convince these smaller fleets to buy the cleanest technologies, the optional low NOx engines that are 90% cleaner than the current standard. And I'm not going to talk too much about Prop 1B program. I think I mentioned that in the overall slide, just that the funds have been fully allocated with the exception of about $4 to $5 million in fall-through funds. So we will be issuing another solicitation for truck projects, clean truck projects through the Prop 1B program criteria. Our lower emission school bus program, the board, I think it was September board, approved awards of up to $35 million for cleaner school buses. These are going to be 206, we're going to replace 206 older diesel buses with basically near zero alternative fuel buses, the cleanest technology that's available. And I wanted to highlight, this is the pilot program. We decided to set aside, close to $8 million for an electric school bus program. There are currently 4 electric school bus models that are available and certified by the California Resources Board. So we wanted to kind of put an incentive out there to encourage school districts to apply, and we got a big response. And we're moving forward with these projects. I think we have about 1/3 of these buses have already been delivered, and so far so good. And VIP, what's unique about our VIP program, our Replace Your Ride program, is that it's not a sustainable source of funding. We're subject to the essentially the greenhouse gas revenue funds that get allocated every year. There is a 3-year funding plan, but the way the funds come to us, it's done through grant agreements. So we have no assurance that we're going to get the next grant agreement allocation. So we build up this program, and we hope it continues, because out of the participants, 94% of them are located in disadvantaged and low-income communities. So the program is serving its purpose. We get this inquiry all the time, across all our incentive programs, looking at heavy duty trucks. How much investment have we made so far for the near zero natural gas trucks that are 90% cleaner than current standard and zero emission vehicles? These programs allow fleets to apply now for a zero emission truck. Even though a zero emission truck is not currently certified by Air Resources Board for commercial use, they can still apply now to secure the funds. So this slide gives you an idea. So far, we've made a $90 million investment across these programs. The AB 134 is our Community Air Protection Funds, Moyer, and our Prop 1B goods movement. So $90 million has been invested for trucks that will deploy the near zero natural gas trucks. And that equates to about, just over about 1,100 trucks. And then on the zero emission, you'd be surprised to hear, there's clearly a signal that was placed to make these incentive funds available, and 50 million, that means, $50 million worth of funding was requested by fleets that are willing to start thinking about ordering these trucks as soon as they're available. So these programs do allow longer time frames. So they for the zero emission trucks, because they're not yet commercially available. So fleets have about 3 years to consider placing their purchase order and getting that vehicle deployed. So hopefully we'll see these trucks becoming commercially available in the next 1 to 2 years. So I think I may have shown you guys this slide maybe about a year ago, if I remember correctly. But essentially what this shows is, it's one thing we go out and we get them, we're successful in getting the grants, but, the grants can't be spent within that 6 month period. It takes time. We have to negotiate the grant terms. We have to, basically solicit the projects. We have to do the contracting work, and then we have to monitor those projects for implementation. So for each of these funding programs, I provided an update of where we're at today. That's highlighted in the green text here. And I just wanted to point out again, the AB 134 funds have been completely awarded to projects. This is pretty interesting. The CEC grant of $8 million, we applied to CEC for a grant, but what was interesting about this is we had a backup list of fleets, trucking fleets that were deemed eligible under Prop 1B criteria that we didn't have sufficient funding for. So CEC said, well, we're going to set aside money to air districts that have these backup lists, because these are fleets that already applied, and it's just a matter of providing additional incentive funds. And we noticed that some of these trucks were port trucks. So we also spoke to the 2 ports, and they were willing to contribute $2 million each, and then AQMD will be contributing an additional $2 million. So overall, this program will be $14 million, and it's going to be specifically for these trucks that are engaged in goods movement and operation at the ports. And it will deploy the near zero natural gas trucks. So I think the ports may have even done a press conference, notice on this program. So we're already executing contracts for these projects and moving ahead. Real quick, just a quick mention of our voluntary NOx remediation measure. This is a one-time grant, and we have already awarded the funds for this program. The intent of this grant came about when AirB, there were some studies done that showed there was an increase in NOx emissions from the use of biodiesel fuel in California. So AirB set aside some funds that would go to the air districts to help basically offset that increase that occurred through NOx emission reduction projects eligible under Moyer. So we are moving ahead with that. I don't know if you heard about our commercial electric lawn and garden program. We're pretty excited about this program. We just launched it on January 29th, and we have our brochures available. If interested, I can certainly get some to you. And basically, this is in part funded through an EPA targeted airshed grant, as well as some local funds. And there are 6 manufacturers we found that make electric models covering everything from leaf blowers, lawnmowers, trimmers, and we decided to make this more comprehensive program where we're offering incentives for all these different lawn and garden equipment, not just mowers or not just blowers. So it covers quite a wide range of electric models that are available. And we've contracted with 6 vendors, and they have distribution facilities all across our air basin. So pretty excited about this program. It's just getting started. And other than that, I covered the other programs. Real quick, the last one, there's a new program ARB set up. It's funded through GGRF funds. It's called Funding Agricultural Replacement Measures for Emission Reductions, otherwise known as the Farmer Program. So this program, ARB appears to have set it up for the long term. Even though we've been getting one-time grants, it looks like they're really putting in the resources to set this up for ongoing funding as we move forward. The allocations that we were given do appear lower than our demand and our actual population of ag sources. So we are working pretty diligently to try and engage farmers in Coachella Valley to help. The ARB is basically initiating a new survey that they're going to be doing that's going to support a new inventory results. So we want to make sure not just Coachella Valley, but any area within our air basin that has agricultural related operations, that they're well represented in that survey. So we'll be working on that. A new program that's going to be initiated this year, the Volkswagen Mitigation Program. Through the Volkswagen settlement, there was a environmental mitigation trust. This is known as Appendix D of the consent decree. What this did was set aside $423 million to California specifically to mitigate the NOx emissions increase from those diesel vehicles that had the defeat devices on them. So this is money set aside specifically to mitigate that NOx impact that occurred here in California. So ARB was identified by the trust as the lead agency. And I wanted to point out, back in April, ARB adopted a beneficiary mitigation plan. And within this mitigation plan, they essentially identified 5 kind of funding categories. And these categories are identified here in this pie chart. They're essentially scrap and replace projects for the heavy duty sector. And the commitment for this funding is to achieve 10,000 tons of NOx reductions over a 10-year period. And the funds will begin to be available starting this year. So this table shows the 5 funding categories identified by CARB in their beneficiary mitigation plan. And I highlighted these 2 categories here in green because ARB has designated South Coast AQMD to be the lead administrator for these 2 categories. And what's unique about this program is that we won't be implementing this just in our air basin. The obligation that we will take on as a project administrator of these categories, we have to implement it statewide with the help of the other 2 air districts listed here. So we are working very closely with San Joaquin, Bay Area. We're in the process now of developing the grant agreements, the implementation manuals. We are gearing up for a series of workshops that will begin. The dates are not yet final. When they are, we'll be posting them on our website. But we're looking at March, April timeframe to start the workshops. And the way it looks right now is that there'll be a total of 6 workshops within the state. There'll be 2 in Northern California, 2 in Central California, and 2 here in our South Coast region, including 1 in San Diego. So 1 will be in South Coast and 1 at San Diego. So just heads up, those will be coming soon. And the purpose of those workshops are to get input on what the criteria might look like for the implementation of these categories. And my final slide, I just learned this morning that this may have been amended in January, but essentially, as part of the Budget Act of 2018, there's going to be some amount of funds set aside for financial incentives, and it will be targeting both stationary and mobile sources. I mentioned AB 134. That was the first year of funding available for community air protection, and the intent of AB 134 was to get early action. So this next budget act will include funds for incentives also, but what's different here is they didn't specifically issue allocations by air district or by funding program. So they have some very general guidelines that these funds are going to be used to, reduce emissions from mobile sources, infrastructure, stationary sources, as well as projects identified through the community emission reduction plans. That's kind of the general guidelines of the bill. I haven't looked in detail to the January amendment, but I heard that it's potentially reduce the funding for incentives. So instead of $245 million, I think it's on the order of $200 million. So hopefully next time I'll be able to update you with more specifics on what our year 2 community air protection incentives will look like. And this concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Vicky. I can't really see folks. If there are any questions, Mr. Alatorre, maybe you can help me out there.
Will do. Any questions? Rita?
Yes, thank you, Vicky. I had a couple of questions. On the SB 856, where can we find more information on what the process is going to look like for application?
It's a good question. What I do know right now, and it may have changed, this is as of December, so perhaps the budget amendment that happened could affect this, but ARB wants to do what they say a public process to determine how to allocate those funds, since the bill gave only general guidance for that. It didn't give anything specific. But they haven't announced anything yet. I heard their staff are working on, they realize they're going to need to come up with some guidelines for stationary sources. So they would have to start work on that. So I recommend you would get in touch with the staff at ARB to find out what they're planning. I haven't been made aware of any workshop dates that have been set yet.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm not familiar with the replace your ride alternative mobility option.
Okay.
It talked, your slide showed transit passes, Uber, Lyft.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So these would be for motorists that qualify for a voucher, but instead of receiving a voucher and purchasing a cleaner car, they would still scrap their old car, but instead they can get a CAL card from us that is, essentially a debit card, so it's pre-funded, and they can use it to pay for Uber, Lyft, or even purchase a transit pass. We kind of pre-program that CAL card to include specific codes that are acceptable expenses under that. We've been offering that for about a year now, and there's a few takers, not as many as we were hoping, but we're very pleased to have that option because some prefer that option. So.
Todd?
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. Is there a lot of funding left in Prop 1B? I thought that was pretty much almost a done program.
Yeah, it's for us, it's still an ongoing program, but the funds have been fully allocated, with the exception of some fall-through funds that we will solicit projects for. So you're going to see sometime this year, probably in the next couple months, we'll release a solicitation for the remaining balance of funds. But essentially they're allocated, fully allocated, with the exception of some fleets that are, actually it's interesting. Some fleets have decided they get a higher incentive amount for the electric truck, and they get a lower incentive amount for the near zero truck. And we've seen fleets go both ways. Some fleets have approached us and said, oh, instead of purchasing the natural gas truck, I want to go electric, so we don't give them additional funds, but they stay at the same funding amount. But if they want to go back, and instead of electric, they go with natural gas, so they can purchase it sooner, not, 2-3 years from now, then they don't get as much money. So we're seeing some money return to the program just based on those fleet switches that they're making right now.
So I can see how that would work one way, but I'm not sure how it works the other way. In other words, when you say that you don't give them any more money if they decide to switch, I think it would be pretty tough if they were a low NOx applicant and then they try to. Is it about the same amount of money that you
So
offer?
if they were awarded the award for say a Class 8 near zero natural gas truck under the Prop 1B program is $100,000.
Okay.
If they were to pick electric option or
They still
zero
only get
emission,
$100,000?
$200,000.
Okay.
So if they were approved for electric and they're now deciding, A or B allows them to switch, then they would go from a $2,000 award down to a $1,000 award. So we are getting some funds coming back.
But if you go the other way,
the other one, they would not get any additional funds.
so they still only get the 100,000.
Right. That's
interesting.
Partly because they were ranked based on that dollar amount. Prop 1B was focused on funding in order of a rank list.
Right.
So if we give them more money, they essentially become a little less cost effective, and we want to make sure they stay above the funding line. So the program has some reasons for that.
No, that makes sense to me. And how long do these folks get to sit on their money? I mean, because you were, that question came up for me a lot, especially when you mentioned that, for example, the zero emission trucks haven't been certified, and in some of these programs they're getting priority. And so how long does that mean they get to sit on the funds? So 3 years.
3 years
and
from...
If 3 years from now no one has a truck, then what?
Then we will probably, they're bound by the contract deadline, so we will probably reallocate to technology that is available and give them that option. So. Okay.
So they just can re-up and then get another 3 years?
No.
Okay.
The legislation requires 4 years to completely liquidate the funds. So we've given them a 3-year timeline. Maybe AirB will agree to a 6-month extension, maybe not. So right now they have 3 years, so they have to fully implement within that time.
And then I had a question with regards to the HVIP program and stacking. I remember talking with Peter Christensen and his team and said that there was some stacking opportunities with Carl Moyer and Prop 1B funds. But Doe Gerling was saying she had a conversation with you and said that they haven't messaged that to you. Am I understanding that correctly? I mean, is that why you're not sure where the ARB is in terms of stacking? Okay.
We're sure that it's not an option for some programs. So what happened with the Carl Moyer program through SB 513, there was acknowledgement to open that program up to allow stacking. So there's no restrictions in Moyer to allow stacking of funds. The only restriction in Moyer is that it expects the private investment to pay a minimum of 15%. They want to see some cost share here from the private owner. So that's the only limitation for stacking under Moyer. So they can't stack 100%, but they can stack 85%.
Understood.
Now, what happens is when you look at combining a Moyer project with HVIP, HVIP is the one that has restrictions.
Right.
ARB has now just currently starting to look at co-funding HVIP with other programs, and that's where ARB has not yet made a decision.
Okay. Because in the decision that was put before the board, the proposal that was submitted to the board, we were asking staff about the stacking issue, and they said you could do it. So I luckily have a call with them at 3 o'clock today, and we'll ask that question.
For electric technologies, they're open to stacking. HVIP, I'm specifically referring to the HVIP decision. So if there's electric technologies involved, for example, we are combining for our electric school bus program, we're able to combine our local funds with the HVIP voucher.
Okay.
And ARB is okay with that. Where it gets a little dicey is the on-road trucks, because HVIP was set up to only fund the incremental cost of the new vehicles. So if you, in addition to that voucher, you get an additional Moyer grant, they say that exceeds the fundamental principle of the HVIP program for those vehicle types. So it's, we keep pushing for stacking, and any help would be greatly appreciated.
Understood. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And then the other question I had for you was, I lost it. I had one more question, but I can follow up with you. Thank you.
Bill?
Okay.
Yeah.
Vicky, with respect to the Replace Your Ride program, somewhere I got the idea that that also included the purchase of new or used less polluting cars or light duty vehicles, like you say. Am I wrong? Your response to Rita was Uber or Lyft or something like that.
Oh, that's just an option we provide to some motorists. So instead of getting a voucher and purchasing a new vehicle, some of them, instead of getting that voucher to purchase a new vehicle, they might want to opt for this Cal card, where they have other options for transportation. Yeah, and we've seen only a small percentage doing it, but they seem happy with it. So I'm glad we have that option. Coming back to your question, yeah, the program does allow for eligible motorists. Basically, they still have to scrap an old car, but they can purchase any car that's 8 years old or newer under the program. Yeah, so used vehicles or new vehicles. The incentive increases with the newer, cleaner vehicles. You can get up to $9,500, for example, for a plug-in hybrid or an electric vehicle. So the incentive for a used vehicle is much less.
Derek, I remembered.
Okay, go for it, Todd.
For the EPA funds, is ARB the allocation of the $60 million for, I guess, the combustion freight mitigation? Are they allowing you to do your own rules, or do they have some sort of formula for that you have to follow in terms of the applications?
Which funds are these?
The combustion freight Volkswagen mitigation
Oh, the
funds?
Volkswagen funds.
Yeah. The 60 million.
Yeah, so as project administrator for the two categories we've been assigned, we will be preparing an implementation plan for those categories. So in that implementation plan, we'll specify the criteria, and it's subject to ARB's approval.
Okay. And then my last question was, did the Air Board staff reach out to you on the HFIP program in terms of what they plan to do in terms of an update? They reached out to us today, but we could have done it last week, and I just was wondering if you had any.
I got an email on Tuesday that said Scott Rowland has not yet reached a decision, but they're still thinking about it. So that's.
What are they thinking about?
The potential for stacking HFIP with our VIP program.
Okay. Well, hopefully we get good news today.
I do too.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, just quick clarification, Vicki. So other than the SB 856 funding, the rest of the programs in your presentation were basically restricted for mobile sources, right? There was no stationary source opportunity in the other ones?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Perez, no more questions on this end.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, Vicki, and obviously the membership that's there for your questions. Written reports, moving on, monthly reports of small business assistance activities. There's no motion required. Is this just a receive and file, Mr. Torre?
Yes, sir.
And thank you. Other matters, moving on to number 7. Other business, any members of this body or staff on his or her own initiative or in response to questions posed by the public may ask a question for clarification and make a brief announcement or report on his or her own activities, provide a reference to staff regarding factual information, request staff to report back at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter, or may take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Is there anybody there with an update or?
Yes, sir, there's updates. So why don't we start with Rita?
Yes, just a brief announcement. RadTech is going to have a conference on March 19th and 20th in Redondo Beach. It's going to be our UVEB Big Ideas Conference, and this year we're partnering with our sister organization, IUVA, to do also food disinfection with UV and E. coli. In lettuce, there's going to be a whole panel on E. coli and lettuce. So, thank you.
Hopefully it gets the colds too. Paul, go ahead.
I would like, not right now, obviously, next month or the following month, a little bit more information on the tax issue that's AQMD is proposing. This morning's paper. You have a community that jumped AQMD's line, and I've quoted this. For example, South Coast AQMD is exploring the possibility of a 2020 sales tax ballot. We have to get in line to raise our taxes. Newspaper this morning. And I would like to get some information on that, just general for the members.
No problem, maybe next month.
Got it.
San Gabriel Valley Tribune, probably. Okay. All right. Any other updates from members? None on this end. None on this end. Supervisor Perez.
Thank you. Moving forward, public comment period. Is there any member of the public like to speak?
No, sir. None on this end.
Seeing none, hearing none. The next meeting date is Friday, March 8th, 2019 at 11:30 a.m. And that's okay with everybody. This meeting is adjourned.